meeting to order, and we are going to adjourn to closed session. The items on our closed session agenda are public employee discipline dismissal release, public employee performance evaluation, conference with labor negotiators. Is there any comment on public comment on closed session? Seeing none, we're going to adjourn to closed session. Everyone is present this evening. And we have nothing to report out from closed session. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. Again, everybody is present here this evening. So notice to the public, if you would like to present on an item or on a topic that is not on our agenda, please let us know. There will be an opportunity for that. Number 5, recognition of guests and presentations. Any guests or presentations?
No guests or presentations.
All right. Any correspondence?
None tonight.
All right. Moving on to the consent agenda. Is there any board comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Seeing double check. I do not see you. Nope, seeing none. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote. PJ?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
And I as well. That item passes. There were no items pulled from the consent agenda, so we are now on stakeholder communications. Luke, go ahead.
All right. Hello, everyone. I have a short report for you today. First off, Dixon High Leadership has finished their Krispy Kreme fundraiser and it was very successful. Extracurricular activities for the middle school and high school are in full swing and are allowing students to reconnect with their friends and mentors. Lastly, our students are doing a great job so far in distance learning and maintaining student involvement for the last couple of weeks. The school should be our main focus moving forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Luke. Is there anybody from the Citizens Oversight Committee this evening? Oh, Tad, there you are. Go ahead.
Hello, so I'm Tad Smith, Chair of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. We'll be having our next meeting on Wednesday, April 21st, so that's next week. And there's a long list of items to review for the John Knight Middle School expenditures, but this will come close to wrapping up that part of the Measure Q funds. And I personally was very pleased to see that the school is now functioning again as a place of learning, and my kid finally got to go and experience part of 8th grade there. Also, I want to remind folks, we still need additional people to serve on the CBOC, particularly as the 2-year appointment for all committee members will end in June. And I have no guarantee that all the members will agree to serve for another 2 years. So please keep your ears open if we can find some interest for that. So thank you very much and stay healthy.
Great, thank you, Tad. Our next topic is employee association reports. Are there any employee association reports this evening? All right, seeing none, are there any parent association reports this evening? Go ahead, Michelle.
Hi, sorry, I'm at the park. Tremont Elementary School is having their book fair starting tomorrow at, I want to say 4, it might be 3:30. Kona Ice will be there selling delicious shave ice. And then on Saturday, it will be 10 to 1 at Tremont in person. You can also purchase books online. We would love the support of our community. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Michelle. All right, public comment. If you would like to talk about something right now that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board, but is not on our agenda, this is your opportunity. Seeing no public comment, we will move on to our first item, which is reopening schools and planning for the 2021-22 school year.
Great, thank you, Catlin. Sorry, I got to unmute myself. Yeah, sorry. All right, I get myself squared away here. So we want to really continue with the pivot that we made at our last meeting and focus on the 2021-22 school year in much greater depth than we would talk about anything right now with the current school year. What we will say is that we came back from our spring break and it felt like we just returned to school. It didn't feel particularly new this week. While it had, some students had only actually had 2 days of in-person school for them before the spring break. The campuses just feel like, well, we had our week off and we're back and we're doing our business. So just great applause and appreciation for the way our kids are handling things. I was talking to a staff member at Dixon High today who said kids are so cooperative and respectful and just appreciative of being there. The little ones saw a family at the store midday, and 3 little ones, elementary land, just finished with school and just so happy to be there. And mom just thrilled with what we're doing. So we're not having any major issues emerge. We continue to place an emphasis on the instruction and making sure that we're doing our very best to accommodate this concurrent model with some students at home and others in person. But our teachers continue to find new ways to adapt and adjust. And a small trend we have going right now is families choosing to come back to in-person who have initially started in distance learning. So I've seen a little bit of that. Talked to a mom and her daughter at Walmart just a couple days ago, a 6th grader, who said, I was really nervous about it, but my friends say it's good, right? So hopefully that trend will continue. So no major issues of any note. We've got things coming together across the district. People are following the safety protocols, and so we've not had cases emerge either. So we're feeling very good about our start so far. Want to make the transition now to talk about next year. Actually, and you'll hear a little bit about summer from Mr. Giramani in just a few minutes. But talked last meeting about the fact that we've got a lot of money and it's COVID funding based, and we're to use it to address the issues that have emerged as a result of the pandemic. So we want to get much more specific with you tonight about the types of dollars that we have, what they can be used for, the timelines in which they can be used, and then what we're doing in terms of a planning process on top of that information around the dollars and cents. So I'm going to invite Monique Stovall, our Chief Business Official, who has a handy dandy little presentation to share with us. We gave you a document to back up tonight that's a little lengthy. It's still a good tool, but what we've got tonight are some slides that Monique is using from a presentation she got, and some of our own materials as well. So, Ms. Stovall, take it away, please.
Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Dolan. This evening, what I will provide you is, as Ms. have. Yesterday, I attended a meeting through the school services of Cal information about the funding that schools are receiving and the allowable uses for those funds. And I'll share that summary with you this evening. Okay. Can you see my screen where to just one slide? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Take that as a yes.
Yep.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. So as I shared, we'll talk about what we're calling the COVID one-time funds. You may also hear us refer to this as our phase 2 funds. we have already received money for that we've used a little bit last year and then also this year. And we're calling that our phase one funds. And then we have this phase two funds, which is a lot of money. We use this table here shows all of the funding that we have received and that
Excuse me,
we
Monique.
anticipate receiving.
Excuse
Yes.
me, Monique. Your connection is not very good.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know, if you want to try to turn off your screen, maybe your video, your camera, and see if that might help a little bit, but your words are really garbled. And you're kind of getting stuck on us at times.
Okay.
So
Is this better?
I think it is, yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, good. That is fine. I've had lots of issues today with technology, so thank you for letting me know. So this slide here shows a table of all of the different funding sources that we have received and that we anticipate receiving. You'll see the COVID funding. We have SB 17, Coronavirus Relief Fund, Prop 98 funds, which we received this year. And we anticipate by July 1, we will have used all of those funds per the last column, the deadline of this school year. We also anticipate receiving in-person instruction grant funds of about $950,000. This money is associated with our return to in-person instruction. We anticipate by the end of this fiscal year and July 1 that we'll have about $475,000 remaining. We have a deadline to use that money by 2022. Our expanded learning opportunity grant, that is also associated with getting our students into in-person education. We anticipate receiving about $2.1 million, and by the end of this fiscal year, we anticipate that we will have about a little over $2 million to spend. And that deadline to use those funds is in 2022. Then we have our gear funding. We've already received this funding and we're already using it. However, we do anticipate that we will have some of the money left over at the end of this fiscal year of about $80,000, and we have until 22 to use that. Next, we have the different ESSER pots of money that we can use. And we have received of ESSER 1, a little over $700,000, and we anticipate about $237,000 remaining. ESSER 2, we anticipate receiving next year at about $2.4 million. We have already allocated how we want to spend some of those monies. And so in this presentation, I'm focusing on what has yet to be allocated, what has yet earmarked. Therefore, we're anticipating that we have about $2.3 million to spend beginning July 1. And we have until 23 to use that. Next, we have Gear 3. We don't know how much we're going to receive, but we do know right now that we will have a deadline of 2023 to use this money. And finally, we have our ESSER 3 funds. That's about $5 million to use. We have not allocated any of that. So in all, we are receiving about $14 million worth of one-time money. As of July 1, we anticipate having about $10 million remaining to spend. This next slide is sort of a visual timeline of how we can spend this money. It's a summary in just a different format of the previous slide. What I want to know is in this lower right-hand corner that we are advised to spend the most restrictive money first. So money and the money most restrictions to spend. And later on in this presentation, I'll talk about how we can use those funds, and we'll get an idea of the restrictions about the allowable uses of the funds. The first is our in-person instruction grant, and we anticipate having about $474,000 to spend as of July 1. And this money, again, is associated with getting our students, and we may use this money for any purposes consistent with providing in-person instruction for any pupil, any student participating in in-person instruction. We have a variety of uses for this money, allowable uses, site upgrades necessary for health and safety, cleaning and disinfecting, personal protective equipment, COVID testing, salaries for employees providing in-person instruction. Next is our expanded learning grant. This also is tied to our students getting back to in-person education. And that's about $2 million to use beginning July 1. I like to think of this pot of money as targeting our concentration grant funding. Those are students that are in, if you see this rainbow list right here, these are the target students for this particular grant. They're not the only students who can benefit from this grant, but those are the target, or as this grant says, the designated student groups. A unique feature about this grant is that 85% must be spent on in-person services, and at least 10% must be dedicated to hire paraprofessionals. Paraprofessionals, we can also use this money should a paraprofessional who supports a student learns and we determine that that student is no longer within our off that particular employee, we may be able to use this money to retain that employee should we decide that those services are necessary. And this slide explains the allowable uses. Number one is it's for extending instructional learning time beyond minimum requirements. And this may be extending the instructional day, extending the instructional year. It's also used for mental health services, school meals, staff training for social emotional health and academic needs. We can use it for tutoring, for community learning, catch up. So there's a variety of uses that we can use this expanded learning opportunities grant, but just remember 85% must be for in-person instruction. And we also have those designated groups. Next, we have our ESSER funds. These funds are less restrictive than the other pots of money that I've discussed thus far, or activities that really just support our students. You'll see this underlined area in the lower left-hand corner that it also includes that we can use this for providing principals and needs of their individual schools. This means that we can customize, for lack of better words, the needs for each school and be able to use these funds. Other uses for the ESSER funds, for mental health support. We can use it for facilities. We can use it for some, use it for other activities necessary to help us to be successful with teaching our students and supporting our staff. Finally, we have our learning loss mitigation, our Prop 98, and our GEAR funds. These funds can be used to support our personnel and operational costs for food services, professional development, also summer school, and our mental health. That summarizes the different funding sources that we anticipate receiving within the next year. As I've shared, we have several years to use these funds. They have many restrictions. What I advise us to consider and really focus on when we're thinking about using these funds, we're always reminding ourselves that these are one-time funds. We don't use one-time funds for many, as someone said the other day, they often hear this from C-Times funds for people who eat, things that eat. So we don't want to use them for ongoing costs. We want to think about using these funds for, again, one-time expenses. And whenever we're identifying a use for them, we need to ensure that we're keeping the end date of that service in mind, so we don't get ourselves into a situation where we are inadvertently using these funds for ongoing expenses. Then when the money is gone, we have to figure out how to sustain those programs. What questions do you have?
Any board questions, comments? All right, is there any public questions or comments on this item? Julie, go ahead.
I have a question. After listening to the athletics meeting last night, is it possible to use some of those funds for COVID testing for the student athletes?
Technically, yes, it is possible to use these funds for COVID testing. And I apologize, I wasn't sure if I needed to wait to answer all of the public questions. I hopped in there.
That was our only question, so I think you're all right. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Okay, great. So anything else?
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen, Mark, if I'm allowed to do so, please. Just gonna run real quickly through a few of our kind of must-dos as we go through this. Some objectives that we really have to endeavor to meet here. So first off is work within this limited time frame we have connected to our LCAP and budget being adopted. We want to include as many of the actions and services as possible in the documents that we're going to see adopted in less than 2 months from now. Also going to have a very large focus on getting input from all stakeholders. You will see down below some of the ways that we're going to do that, but we do want input from across the district community. I mentioned the LCAP, the planning and actions and services that we propose, we want to see align with the LCAP and its development to the greatest degree as possible. Obviously, the LCAP in the past has never included anything like COVID testing or air scrubbers or anything like that. So there's not going to be a perfect alignment, but in terms of the things which support learning and instruction, positive environments, we would expect to see that alignment. Alignment with the budget development process. We have to absolutely make sure that we comply with the requirements for the expenditures and the accounting. We know that we're going to be very, very carefully audited for the use of these funds over the next handful of years, really, because we have so much time to spend some of them anyway. So meeting the obligations of the laws is going to be paramount, and being able to prove that we did. And finally, creating plans at what we do, that we make sure it meets the needs that we've seen develop from our students and their families and our staff members. This money is specifically intended for targeting the issues that have developed as a result of this last year plus of really kind of the devastation of our system. So as we do our work, we have to make sure that we are targeting these particular areas and making sure that we're doing our jobs right is really what it boils down to in many, many ways. So what have we been up to on this? So we have been up to a bunch of meetings already this week. Sorry, there we go. So on Monday, we had executive cabinet and cabinet meetings. I had all of my administrative team together yesterday, talking about this tonight. Starting next week, we're going to administer 3 surveys out within the district. One is for staff, all staff, certificated, classified, and management. We're going to get one out for our families, parents, guardians. We're also going to survey our secondary level students this time. We haven't included them in surveying of any note in recent instances of conducting surveys, but especially now, we feel like asking our kids, what do you need? What would benefit you right now? That we should hear some things from them that would be helpful. I'll get the word out tomorrow about town hall meetings that will be held. Actually, I think it's the 20th and 22nd. So I will change that as we get that information out. So similar to what we did before we came back for our in-person return. And then I'm going to ask for a special meeting of the governing board. It can either be Thursday, April 29th or Saturday, May 1st. But I think we're going to get all this input. And I think we have to get that in front of you, along with the many proposals that are being developed by the administrative team right now. We've created a template and asked them, tell us what you think you need. So we'll have these documents that will have an action or service described, and we'll tie it to an LCAP goal. We'll say who is being impacted by this action or service. And we'll talk about the expected outcomes, and then we'll talk about also how we're going to measure whether those outcomes are reached or not. So we need more time than just a regular meeting to be able to do this. So after I'm done, we can talk about which of those days might be better. We come back to a board meeting, a regular board meeting on May 6th. And really we have, and in some ways we may need to get this done by May 6th, but no later than May 20th. We have to have you folks say, go, push send on these things that we're doing. So we've got a lot planned to plan, and really just committed to getting as much input as possible and making sure we're responsive to what people are saying they need. So that's it for me really quickly. Just looking for some consensus around a special meeting.
All right, what is the pleasure of the board? There's 2 dates, April 29th or May 1st. Would you rather do Thursday evening, April 29th? Does that work for everybody? Yep, head nodding, yes.
What day is that?
It's Thursday, April 29th.
There's a CSBA Region 3 meeting, but I don't know. Not a game changer.
All right, let's do that. Let's target that date then.
Okay, 29, great, thank you.
All right, anything else? On this
Nope,
item?
that's it.
All right, and we have already opened public comment on that. It looks like Kathy, you have another comment on that. Go ahead. Kathy, your hand is raised?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just wanted to know if it was possible for us to connect from the DTA position at some point with the district office as well concerning some of these things, please.
Of course.
Just putting it out there for you guys. Thank you.
Mhm. You're welcome, Kathy. Any other public comment before we move on to the next item? All right, this item does not require action, so we are moving on to item number A2, John Knight Middle School renovation project. Board of Education resolution to approve increase in piggyback agreement with school specialty furniture and equipment.
We've got Lee Coop from School Services Incorporated for this item and the next one, both quick items, things that you have heard and taken action on before, just with some new circumstances around them. So Lee, take it away, please.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Dolan, members of the public. I hope my audio works tonight. So in front of you on this item are two backup documents. One is the board resolution itself, and one is a memo that I have prepared to give you some of the background on it. As you recall, the board approved a couple of piggyback resolutions to allow purchases for furniture and equipment for John Knight Middle School back in September. We have successfully gone through much of that process. The furniture was delivered, and we have a second order that's being prepared for, or that's getting ready to be delivered from School Specialty. And they did the entire school except for the library, and Campbell Keller did the library furniture. So with Campbell Keller, we're complete on that. We don't anticipate any more purchases on that. And we were under budget, about $35,000 on that. But on School Specialty, we anticipate going slightly over the board authorization from September. And there is a math error in my memo, and my apologies. I have that the total budget for furniture is $750,000, but it's really $700,000. But beyond that, all the math works. So we are under budget for the entire furniture and equipment. We've spent about $638,000 there out of a total of $700,000. So really what we're asking tonight is to be able to increase School Specialty to allow a little bit more purchase from them and not do anything with Campbell Keller. In fact, we're going to be closing out that purchase order. So by increasing this by $30,000, you would be allowing us to place this third order that we're getting ready to do. It includes some more outdoor tables, some shade umbrellas for those tables, and a number of different things as we settle into the school. So because we allocated an authorization for each vendor for accountability, so we can make it really clear what we spent on each one. So right now we need to increase the School Specialty one, but we remain under budget for the other one. So even with this increase, we will still be under budget under the $700,000. And so that's what the board resolution would allow. And I'm happy to take questions. Otherwise, we're recommending adoption of the resolution.
All right, are there any board questions on this item? All right, is there any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion for our resolution. There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. We'll do roll call vote. DJ?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
And I as well. That motion passes. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
More item for us on the John Knight Middle School renovation project and window kitchen project.
Again, Lee Coop with School Site Solutions, and thank you very much. This one is a ratification of a contract extension for the project inspector services with Yuba Sutter Inspection Services. We've seen, the board has seen a number of these, and hopefully this will get us through the end of this project as the project has been extended over several months. So this one is an increase in the renovation project in the amount, not to exceed amount of $15,000. And that would bring the total for that project at $161,575. And then the window kitchen project, which is a separate project, but still on the same site. We also use Yuba Sutter for that, for the inspection services for that. And the original contract amount was $23,650. And we would ask for an extension number 1 on this, increasing it and to a new total amount, increasing it, and it would bring a new total amount of $58,270. That increase would be $34,620. So we've kind of had to go through as this project has extended and the scope has increased. You've seen it in several months, but hopefully this will get us through the end of the project and you won't see any more of these. We ask for approval.
Thank you. Are there any board questions, comments on this item?
Yeah, how close are we to being done with the
question was, how close are we to being done with the kitchen? So we anticipate it's going to be mid-June when everything will be tucked up in there. The amount of underground in the foundation and some of the plumbing and electrical work up above more complicated than anticipated, as is the case. So just reviewed the calendar Tuesday at the construction meeting and looking at a mid-June finish point.
Has eating kids gone okay though?
Yes, it has. Yeah. We're, it's grab and go lunches everywhere. So it's not really any different than what we would be doing, but serving a good number of meals at JK. Yeah. Thanks.
Is there any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to ratify the increase for the contract for the inspection services.
I move to ratify the increases.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote. BJ?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
And I as well. That motion passes. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.
We are moving on now to item B1, our state assessment update.
Good evening, all. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So the first item for your consideration tonight and discussion, it is listed as a potential action item, although I don't think that you formally need to take any action, but I want to make sure the board and community was aware of where the state of California is with regard to testing. There were a number of questions sort of floating around about testing throughout the year. And when I'm saying testing now, I'm referring to the state testing that we typically do this time of year. So we did get some sort of formal decisions finally over spring break on April 6th. The state received the waiver from the federal government with regard to testing. And the good news is that there's some flexibility offered to school districts in California with regard to testing. The other news, I won't call it bad news, is that we still need to do testing, which was something that the new administration had established in February for all of us. So we knew some sort of testing was going to happen. We weren't sure what kind. Long and short of it is we need to test in ELA and math. We need to test our 3rd through 8th grade students and our 11th graders. That's every year. Those are the students that we test. Those exams need to be uniformly administered across a grade span, the school or the district. In other words, we can't pick and choose which tests we're doing based on student groups, et cetera. We need to have a consistent measure. And then they need to be able to provide results for you all as a board, but for parents and guardians, educators, et cetera. That's at the individual student level, but also at the student group level, the global level. So what we, and it's not in the board cover sheet, part of that was because I wanted to make sure we had a chance to at least talk with principals this week about where we are based on this decision. And so what we're currently proposing is a little different based on our grade span. So what we're proposing for grades 3 through 5 is that we use our Renaissance Learning Assessment for ELA. This is a test that we already have, that we use frequently throughout the year. It meets all of those criteria I listed above. And for mathematics, we would use the test bank from our IO assessment system, or IO database, vetted through our math coach, Scott Emmel, to ensure that those questions are in line with what we're expecting of our students. So both of those are not the SBAC, which is the traditional, the Smarter Balance Assessment, which is the typical exam that we give. We feel it's a little more relevant to our students. It'll be a little less stressful for them and for our teachers. They know how to use these systems, and it will give us good information. In grades 6 through 8, we are going to be a little bit unique in Solano County, from my understanding, speaking with other assistant superintendents who do the work that I do. We are recommending that we use the SBAC test at that grade level. And the reason that we're different is that, and this is a hole in our program that we've discussed in the past, is that we don't have a formal assessment system yet in place. We're actually working toward doing that for next year. I'll touch on that a little bit later. And so in the absence of having something like we have at elementary school, where we have Ren Learn and this IO assessment bank, we really feel like the SBAC is the best answer that we have at this point. I'll remind the board and the community that the SBAC has been shortened, which means it won't be quite as onerous for staff and for students to administer and take this year. But that's what we're recommending there for both ELA and mathematics. And then that would be the same for our 11th graders. I haven't heard of many high school level kids who aren't being asked to take the SBAC. The SBAC is still going to be used for the EAP program, which can waive students from some initial testing requirements at the CSU level. So again, it's a shortened test. There are juniors. We feel that they are capable of taking that test. And similarly with our middle school program, we don't yet have that really formalized assessment program in place, although we are gunning for that for next year. I want to touch briefly on the science exam that's typically given at 5th, 8th, and at least one time in high school for students. It's called the CAST test. That has not been formally waived. However, you see in the guidance there, we're required to give our exams in ELA and math. It doesn't talk about science at all. So after talking with a colleague at the county, really it's up to the local agency whether or not they give the CAST. It is available to give to our students, but it's based on our decision on whether or not we feel like it's feasible for us to give. And at this point, with the shortened amount of time that we have with our students, in addition to the training that would have to go on, the rescheduling that would have to happen, and also the giving of these other exams, the CAST really feels like a bridge too far for us at this point, nor do we really anticipate that it's going to give us data that we feel is super relevant to our work. So at this point, we're proposing not giving the CAST at 5th, 8th, and 11th grade. I will also point, 5th, 8th, and high school. I'll talk about quickly how these tests will be administered. As we always do, we'll expect our sites to organize and execute their own testing program with central office support. So we've already begun those discussions with our school sites. A couple of other important points. I know those who've been following, board comings and goings for years know that there's quite a bit of accountability that comes along with testing. A big part of our school dashboard, the board and the community typically want to know how we did. The accountability measures from the state of California and the federal government have been waived. So whether or not this won't form part of our dashboard for next year, there's another big piece that's on there, in that districts are required to test 95% of all their students in every subgroup or student group. And if they fail to do that, there's actually a penalty that they face as far as their performance data is concerned. And that 95 threshold has also been waived for this year. And I guess the point in pointing that out is in Dixon, we typically have no problem hitting that 95% threshold. Our kids and families right along with us. And we want to make sure that we're doing testing this year. We want to do it right. But we also need to balance the needs of our kids, especially social emotionally. We know that they're under a lot of stress right now. So we do anticipate more families asking to have their students opt out of testing this year. That will require some formal communication with the school sites if they would like to do that. But that's not something that we feel at this point is something that we would, I don't want to say we aggressively talk with families in the future, in years past, but if a family doesn't want to take a test in years past, we want to make sure that they understand the implications of that. This year, I think we'll plan on being a little looser with those conversations so as not to add any additional stress to our families. Finally, I did mention it, we are working on, maybe some folks are saying, well, how are you going to get good data to know where our kids are for the purposes of planning for next year? And that is an absolutely fair question. We'll use what we can from these assessments. I'll be honest, I'm dubious about how useful they will be to us. I think they'll have some use for us, but they will not be as accurate as is typical. However, at the beginning of next year, what all students can expect is an implemented assessment system that we're working on adopting for next year when our kids roll back, to be able to get that baseline data and really make sure that we're meeting kids' needs by name and by need is what we're going for here. So there'll be more presentation on that for the board as we continue our work with that committee. So that's it for me.
Great, thank you. Are there any board comments or questions on this presentation?
I have one.
Go ahead.
So,
Lucas, will you?
oh yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
So with our timeline here, it's kind of condensed, and I know towards the end of this school year, there's going to be like finals and other tests like SAT tests and stuff like that. we have a timeline for when these state testings would go on? So we can plan in the future for, just in general as a student?
Yeah, so actually I have there is a proposal out from your school. This is Lucas, right, talking?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, I want to make sure. Yeah, actually, your school site has already established some tentative dates for early May.
Okay.
To try and get this out of the way as quick as possible, and so we don't interfere with finals and end of year pieces. So once we sort of have a conversation tonight, I think the community can look forward to some formal communication coming out. First from my desk early next week or mid next week, and then subsequent communication from school sites.
Okay, it's good to hear that it's not going to interfere with any of the other tests.
Thank you. DJ, you have a question?
Nick, I don't know if you could talk about some considerations around reporting the results, like individualized or maybe
Sure.
aggregate, or to families, or even just having staff and teachers practice how they would analyze the data for future instruction, stuff like that, because like you said, there's going to be a new software testing system next year. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that reporting of the results.
Sure. So I think I'll start global first, if I could. I would anticipate that the board would want to hear results as we begin next year, just generally about how our students do, and by student group and by schools. I think the guidance clearly calls for that. It also calls for individual reporting to be done for families. So I'll start with elementary. Ren Learn is set to do that, and our teachers are pretty comfortable doing that already. So I have no concerns there. Likewise, the IO program, what we do in the math, can provide individualized student reports for families and for teachers to consider. And I haven't heard anything to the contrary that SBAC is not going to provide us with the typical individualized school reports that they usually do. So I guess I'll be honest, I'm making an assumption that they'll provide that. I don't know why they wouldn't. As far as the data analysis goes of this, it needs to be part of the conversation. I think as I copped to earlier, I don't know how useful this is going to be based on the year that we've had. I'm much more enthusiastic about the data that we're going to get from our new assessment system in the fall. I think our families absolutely need to see that as we begin next year. But they also, if our kids are going to take the time to do this testing this year, they need to get that information as well. Did I answer your question?
It answered his question. Look like a thumbs up there.
Okay, cool.
Are there any other board comments, questions? All right, I'm going to move on to public comments or questions on this item. All right, seeing none, we will move on to item B2, summer planning update.
Okay. Mark, may I have share screen? Oh, good. Great. Thank you. All right. And I'm not where I want to be. Pardon me. Great. So in line with what Monique presented earlier with some of the opportunities that are coming to us as a result of some of the additional funding we're getting, there's obviously a lot more information to come on that, but wanted to make sure we got this in front of you now, because I know summer programs has been a big conversation, not only in Dixon, but across the state. So just a quick kind of overview of some of the plans that we have here. I want to give a shout out to Maria Lukeen, our SCG coordinator, who is the primary point person on this work. She's done most of it. So thank you, Maria, as we get going. So I want to start just quickly with some traditional offerings, what we typically do in a year. We have about 15 to 18 days, depending on how the calendar is. Really depends on where 4th of July falls usually, and where the end of school happens. The focus is on migrant students. A lot of the funding we use for our summer school comes from our Migrant Ed grant. We do a math academy at middle school that is for all students, as well as some credit recovery at high school, which is for all students. So average total number of students served is about 208 any given year. It's about 6 to 7% of our students if we're thinking about 3,000 students. So not a huge program, but really critical for the kids who get to participate in it. So some strengths and challenges of our current program. It's a positive place for our kids. It's really effective for our migrant students. The high school students who've been able to participate have been able to recoup some really key credits for their graduate purposes of graduation. And then we have been able to do some enrichment and cultural opportunities, woven into our elementary curriculum, especially. Some of the challenges, recruitment, and this is in no way to demean anybody who's worked at our summer schools in the past. Thank you for all you've done. And last year, actually, we were able to fully staff our summer school with fully credentialed teachers, but that typically is a challenge to be able to fully staff our summer school with fully credentialed teachers. We want to serve more kids. 6% to 7% of our students is not enough. Funding has typically prohibited us from doing that. So we've had limited programs for our non-migrant students, as you saw from the earlier slide. And then we had no access for our credit deficient students in the early high school grades. So if you had a 9th grade student who maybe failed a class or two and wanted to spend that first summer after 9th grade catching up, so they walk into 10th grade credit hole, we had to push them aside and say, sorry, we're operating a triage model here and work with our juniors or incoming seniors and incoming juniors first. That's a very reactive approach. We'd like to be much more proactive. So as we talked about earlier, so the new funding provides some new opportunities to mitigate the effects of school closures and allows us to think a little bit bigger about our summer programs. And more specifically, we want to just reach more kids and then also expand the duration of our summer programs. So beyond that 15, 18 days, actually get them to 20 days. So what's that plan look like? So grades K through 5, we'd obviously continue our migrant program that's driven by our migrant ed DSA. We also want to expand our English learner program using our EL Achieve program. We're very proud of our EL Achieve program. We've not been able to use that in summer school historically. We can use that right now, which is really great. And then also have a non-migrant program, non-EL program that focuses on reading and math intervention. So what would that look like? Those are really 3 different groups. I'll point to the top row here. The migrant program really kind of is a more traditional approach to our K-5, to what we currently do. It's 20 days of 8:15 to 1 o'clock. We'd be operating that with about 24 kids at every grade level. Instructional focus there you can see around this keystone species that we've done for a couple of years that's really successful for our kids. Now this middle row and the last row are actually kind of a little bit more interesting in that we want to run 2 10-day sessions. And when I tell you earlier that we have one of our major concerns is around recruitment, and we know that this summer might present some additional challenges as far as recruiting folks. Running more days might seem counterintuitive as to trying to attract highly qualified folks to work with our kids. But by running 2 10-day sessions, we can actually work with our staff and say, look, we can divide this up. If you can do one session really before the 4th of July, or you want to do a session after the 4th of July, it's 10 days. If you can give us 10 days, that'd be amazing. That's how we're sort of thinking about this from a recruitment standpoint. So you'd have an A and B group, an A group in the morning and a B group in the afternoon, running about 12 students in each of those groups, 4 times, if you think about it that way, throughout the summer. And we're doing EL Achieve for our EL program. And then for all of our K-5 students, we'd want to identify them ahead of time for some reading and math intervention. Again, we wouldn't anticipate kids coming all day long. They'd be in the 8:15 to 10:15 group for 2 weeks, or the B group from 11 to 1 for 2 weeks. So I think we can serve a lot more kids doing this. Look at this really as like a kind of more of a boot camp, get them in 10 days, intense instruction, try and do what we can for as far as some catch up goes for our elementary students. Secondary is a little different. We would continue serving our migrant students as we have historically. For our non-migrant students, we'd continue with our Math Academy, but then also weave in some Avid Student Success Academy for grades 6 through 8, really sort of preparing kids to be successful in middle school and beyond. There's some curriculum there established by Avid that we are really excited about. And then in grades 9 through 12, again, migrant program as is there, but then also a more traditional approach to credit recovery. Right now, kids are using our online program, which is really challenging for some students who might struggle. So actually offering, English classes for our students and offering some math classes, those are the 2 places where we know we have kids get, that's our the 2 credit areas where students have to earn the most credits to graduate, but also the places where kids tend to fall down in 9th or 10th grade, and we can catch them there. Again, some really quality instruction. And then also continue to offer the online credit recovery for students who might need them, especially in the upper grades. So approximate costs and funding sources, you'll notice here, I'm not giving you any costs right now, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But we'll continue to migrant ed funds for sure. Really, I'm not noticing any of the funds that Monique went through earlier as being, out of bounds for these funds. I think we can absolutely use any of those funds to expand summer school. And then, of course, we can also continue to use our supplemental concentration grant dollars. That's what's in our LCAP right now. Summer school is part of our LCAP, so lots of different pots to be able to pull from. Approximate cost here in this for anybody listening out there. I'm going to be very deliberate here, and I say this: we plan to pay more this summer because we know we have the need, we know we have the funds. We also know that summer is a little shorter this year based on our start and end date from last year. But we got to get highly qualified staff in to work with our students if we're going to be successful. So I don't have a figure yet for that because we want to make sure that we're working with our partners to figure out what's a good price there. But we are thinking that will be a way to entice more folks to be able to come back. So if you're a DUSD teacher, think about summer school, please. And if we don't have DUSD teachers out there and you're a non-DUSD teacher who wants to work in DUSD this summer, well, please consider us because we're going to need some bodies to help us execute this much larger program this summer. And I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. Are there any board comments or questions? Jewel?
Yeah, I didn't see the location. Is there a location for summer school or is it at the child's home school?
Great question, Jewel. So we run it at 2 sites traditionally. The secondary program, so middle school and high school, regardless of what your home school is, is traditionally done at Dixon High School. And then we alternate between Anderson and Gretchen Higgins for the elementary program. And I can't remember whose turn it is. So, but it'll be 1 site typically is what we do.
Great, thank you. Any other board questions, comments? All right, seeing none, I'm going to open for public comment or question on this item. All right, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Giamonte, for your presentation.
Thank you. And thanks again to Maria.
We will move on to item C1, Measure J, refinancing update.
Hi, this is Monique. I'll keep my camera off and hopefully we won't have any glitches. This evening, we are presenting an update to the presentation that we provided in November about the refunding for our Measure J bond. Rachel Chung Quay, there we go, from our financial advisors will be presenting a summary of your backup documentation. Rachel?
Thank you, Mrs. Stavo. Hello, members of the board, Superintendent Dolan. As Mrs. Stavo introduced, my name is Rachel Chen Quay here from Film and Roll-Up and Associates. As you may recall, last November, I presented to you the potential refinancing of the district's Measure J general obligation bonds. I'm pleased to be back here tonight to update you on the actual results of this successful refinancing. I know you have received a longer version of the update, and I prepared a short PowerPoint for tonight that summarizes the information you have already received. If I may share my screen. Perfect. Here we go. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So I'll dive right into it. You may recall this exact same slide, and here is the final refinancing savings. As mentioned earlier, after the board directed the finance team to work with Mrs. Stavo directly to secure the most savings that we could in the current market, on January 12th, we successfully locked in approximately $950,000 of gross taxpayer savings, which equates to 5.87% of net present value savings. This exceeded the board's minimum threshold of 4% and certainly well exceeded the 3 to 5% range that the GFOA would recommend an issuer to explore refinancing opportunities. This is the comparison of repayment chart that I have included on the bottom of the slide. that as the board directed, we've structured the refinancing to provide savings to taxpayers in every year. And that saving taxpayers in the community will start seeing it, not the current tax bill, but the upcoming 2021-22 tax bill. If there are no questions, I think Monique would agree with me that it was certainly a lot of moving parts as we were monitoring the market and trying to time the best entry point to bring the district's refinancing or general obligation refunding bonds to the market. Here is a quick summary of some of the saving results comparison. When Monique and I started discussing this potential, which was back in September last year, we were looking at, if you're looking at the table, the first column there, and I'll just focusing on the net present value saving. We were looking at roughly 6.1% of savings. By the time we get all the documentation prepared and presented in front of the board in November, as you may recall, that was right after the presidential election, which caused a lot of disruption in both the stock market as well as the municipal bond market. We saw a spike in the interest rates, and at that time, the savings threshold is roughly 2.9%. So we received the direction from the board to monitor the market continuously. And by the time that we enter January, and specifically on January 11th, that is a Monday. And we originally thought that we would have a market preview discussion with Mrs. Stovall, as well as the Solano County tax collector and treasurer's office on Monday, thinking that we would bring this to market on Thursday. Little do we know, comes Tuesday, Treasury performance, and specifically the US Treasury interest rate, which is a benchmark for us to price these general obligation refunding bonds, were certainly in the district's favor. And thanks to Monique and the district for being able to be so flexible in their schedule, working with the team, we brought this to the market the next day, that Tuesday. So a lot of changes, but we were able to secure greater than what the board directed us to, and in fact, fairly close to when we started this process last September. So happy to be here tonight and update the board on the close to $950,000 gross savings that we'll be able to provide to the community by refinancing the Measure J general obligation bonds. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Are there any board questions or comments on this presentation? All right, I'm going to open for public comments or questions on the presentation. And it looks like there are no public comments. I will just say thank you all for your work on this. This was a great savings to the community, and I appreciate all that you did to get us here.
My
Rachel,
pleasure.
thank you so much. Great job. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we are moving on to our last agendas, items for future meetings. Is there any agenda items for future meetings from board members? Anything you'd like us to discuss? All right, then board announcements. Any board announcements? All right, seeing none, our coming events, our next board meeting, our next regular scheduled board meeting is May 6th, but we may in fact have, or we will have the April 29th meeting as a special meeting. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.